صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن الناس من يعبد الله على حرف فإن أصابه خير اطمأن به وإن أصابته فتنة انقلب على وجهه خسر الدنيا والآخرة ذلك هو الخسران المبين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Continuing with our discussion on Risalat Al-Huquq, with its commentary, we were talking about the first right, which is the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the right to worship Him. And in that regards, we've had 3 sessions, I believe. Inshallah, we're trying to make this to be the last session so we can move on to the next right. The reason we are discussing so much in as far as the first right is concerned, because it is in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The later rights will be in regards to some of our body parts, some of our family members, and then people in the community. So we will not be spending that much time on them, but because it is in regards to the creator of the universe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why there are different aspects of as far as the rights of Allah is concerned. We see some of the rights that we had discussed as far as the worshipping was concerned. Today what we want to talk about is another form of worship, or rather this aspect of looking at worship, where worshipping under all circumstances. We've talked about different aspects of it. We inshallah will continue with this aspect tonight, that insan should be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala under all circumstances. This is where we see our religion tells us that we must worship God no matter what situation we might be in. We should know that God is always present. So it's not the case that when you are facing some sort of calamity or turmoil that you forget God and then you do not worship Him, or something devastating has taken place or happened to you, and you say, well, who has time to pray now? Or we shouldn't be praying. Or we don't have time to pray now. We're busy with something which is far more important. Nothing is more important than God, and we know that God is always present. Various states such as happiness or sadness, poverty and affluence, health or illness should not affect our worshiping of God. Some people only remember God when they are in trouble or when they need Him. That is the reason I recited this verse from Surah Hajj, verse number 11, in which He says, there are among men some who serve God, as it were on the verge. If good befalls them, they are therewith well content. But if a trial comes to them, they turn on their faces. They lose both this world and the hereafter. That is a loss for all to see. Surah Hajj, verse number 11. This verse obviously implies that these are the people who only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They only say that they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in reality, they are not really doing it. Or, in other words, they might be doing it, but they're not doing it wholeheartedly. And that leads to another topic, which is that when you worship God, you should be enjoying or getting the pleasure out of this worship, as opposed to keeping it or feeling that it is a burden upon your shoulder that you have to get rid of it as soon as possible so that you are bari uz-zimma. That should not be the case. They have a very weak faith. This implies that they are not in the mainstream of faith of Islam, but only on the side of it. Such people are not firm in their belief and might change if they experience even minor problems. There are different ahadith in this regard. One from our 5th Imam, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam. Zurara quotes this hadith from Imam, says, there are some people who abandoned paganism and worship God, but they did not acknowledge Prophet of Islam, Prophet of Allah. Their worshipping sprung from pagan roots, since they said, we will acknowledge him as the Prophet of God if God increases our wealth and children. So they said, well, if we receive some sort of benefit, we will only go ahead and acknowledge him as a prophet. So they were always looking after their own interests, as we see today in the world. Whenever, different nations are doing different things, it seems that they're always doing it because there's some sort of interest that is hiding in there. Second is take pleasure when you're worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's another hadith in this regard. Muhammad ibn Yahya quoted on the authority of Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa, that, again from our fifth Imam, in which he said, Ala inna likulli ibadatin sharratun, that indeed there is an eagerness for every worship, which then turns into laziness. Imam says there's eagerness. Initially, you have this height, you want to go ahead and perform this ibadat, you're so up to it. The same way a child would be very eager to go to school the first day of his life. You're preparing the young child to start the first grade or kindergarten. They're all excited. They look at their brothers and older siblings who have gone to school, and they have this, eagerness that they want to go as well. But when they go there, it's like, okay, we have to go there every single day now. So it sort of becomes, something which is not anymore intriguing to them. It sort of becomes boring to them. So this is the same thing. Every ibadat also starts out with eagerness, and then it turns into laziness, as Masum says. So one whose eagerness in worship leads to my sunnah. So obviously Imam is quoting from the hadith of Rasulullah. So Rasul says, whose eagerness in worship leads to my sunnah, he is guided, and whoever opposes my sunnah has gone astray. So this is one sign of seeing it, that if you see a person after having performed my ibadat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he turns towards my sunnah, he follows my tradition, see that this person still has the eagerness to perform the ibadat. But if he's leading or staying away from my sunnah or staying away from my tradition, then this person has lost this eagerness, and it does not exist anymore. Indeed, I pray, Prophet says, I sleep, I fast, and I break my fast. I laugh and I cry. So whoever dislikes my path and my sunnah is not from me. Here, Prophet is trying to make another statement by saying that it is not haram to laugh sometimes. It is not haram to cry over different things, as some people might have made it into a bid'ah, that it is an innovation, or it is haram to cry, or it is haram to laugh, or it is haram to do this and that. No, Prophet said these are all parts of my sunnah. I do all of those things, and still, who can you compare me with as far as the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned? He also said, كَفَى بِالْمَوْتِ مَوْعِظَةٌ وَكَفَى بِالْيَقِينِ غِنًى وَكَفَى بِالْعِبَادَةِ شُغْلًا. He said death is the best admonition, because when you want to give someone, some sort of lesson, you say, well, look at the person who died. They had all of these things. If you want to tell someone who's running after the wealth of the world, you tell, look at this billionaire. He was there and he's no longer there. His wealth is not going to do any good to him. So don't run after the wealth in this fashion. Or people who are running after different things, if you want to set an example for them, what do you say? Well, look at the death. Death is something which will approach every single person. So death, Prophet said, is the best admonition. Certitude is the best wealth. Yaqeen, if you have yaqeen ki dawlat, that is the best wealth anyone can have. And God's worship is the best occupation. He said three things which are best in all of these fields. He talks about death to be the best admonition. He talks about yaqeen to be the best capital and best certitude, or best, as far as the wealth is concerned. And he says God's worship and ibadat is something which is the best occupation. If you occupy yourself with the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing better than that. Again, our sixth Imam in regards also adds on, he says, لِكُلِّ أَحَدٌ شِرَّةٌ وَلِكُلِّ شِرَّةٌ فَتْرَةٌ فَطُوبَ لِمَنْ كَانَتْ فَتْرَتُهُ إِلَى خَيْرٍ. He said each person has some eagerness. For each instance of eagerness, there is also some sluggishness. How prosperous are those who are inclined towards the good, even in the times of their sluggishness. So even when you sometimes feel lethargic, sometimes you feel tired, you're sluggish, you're not up to par as far as your senses and consciousness is concerned, still you do not lose the same pleasure that you get out of performing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as you would on a normal day. This is where we need to also understand that you should not overburden the ibadat onto you, lest it becomes a burden upon you, and then you start feeling sluggishness or start feeling that you're tired of this ibadat. This is also where we see La tukrahu ila anfusikumul ibadah. Masoom says, do not force yourself to worshiping God when you are tired or unwilling to do so. So do not force yourself, because when you force yourself in those situations, you're only doing an exercise and there's no spirit involved in it, there's no spirituality in it, and therefore you're not going to be able to perform the ibadat the way it should be performed. So don't perform ibadat at the times when you're tired, and obviously this is discussing in regards to mustahab ibadat, but even in sometimes as far as the wajib ibadat is concerned, obviously salat ala waqtiha. This is very critical. When we say salat ala waqtiha, salat on its time. So sometimes salat could be delayed for something else. For example, if you see someone is in danger, someone is drowning, there's some emergency, you go help that individual first and you leave salat. So don't say, well, it's time for my salat, so I have to pray first and then I'll come and help this person who's drowning. No. This is common sense, and this is also what Quran tells you, or Islam tells you, that when a person is in need, you go help that person and then you delay your salat. It's not that you have to pray. If it's 1 o'clock the time for salat, you have to pray. As-salatu ala waqtiha. That's what it means. That the appropriate time for salat on that occasion is that you help that individual and then you come towards the salat. Don't go towards salat at the time when someone else is in need and they might even drown, or they might even put themselves into danger. So la tukrahu ila anfusikum al-ibadah. Do not make it a burden upon you. When a person pays extra attention towards ibadah and prepares before presenting himself to God or herself to God by dedicating a room for prayer, reciting the supplication of wudu, then slowly he or she will start enjoying the salat. The problem, I think we've mentioned it before in some other occasion, is that we limit the time for our salat to like 4 to 5 minutes. If it's Dhuhr prayers, it's only going to take us 5 minutes. 1 minute to do wudu, 4 minutes to perform the salat. You can never get, or some people probably could, but you and I, at least the status that we are at, we cannot get enough, spirituality out of it if we try to perform it in mere 5 minutes. So when you dedicate a room for salat, when you read the du'as, as far as the du'a of wudu are concerned, you prepare for it, when the time approaches. And with this mindset, you enter into the room where you have dedicated for salat. And then you perform the salat with all the mustahabat. For example, wearing, nice clean clothes, putting on perfume and whatnot. And then entering into the bargah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where you'll see that you're getting the pleasure out of this salat. Avoid praying when tired and lethargic, in order to not lose the importance of salat as well as other ibadah, so you can enjoy them better. Ask yourself, why do you enjoy doing things that you enjoy doing? So you and I, we have different interests. Why do we have those interests? How do we find enjoyment in those interests that we have? Some people like playing games. Some people like playing, not that I'm comparing games or anything with salat, just to resemble, just so that we can understand. Some people like fishing, for example. They get a kick out of fishing. Some people like hiking, for example. They look forward to hiking. Different people have different interests, and they look forward to doing those things at their appropriate times. And when they do perform those things, they enjoy it thoroughly. This is the same thing you should look for as far as the salat is concerned. And if you can implement the same enjoyment that you have over there and find out why do you enjoy that particular act and implement into salat, you will start enjoying salat as well. Salawat bi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Being moderate is very important. As I mentioned, we are advised to take pleasure in worshiping. This is meant to help us worship God out of our love for Him so that we can benefit from the good effects of worshiping. We should avoid, obviously, tiring ourselves or keeping it to moderation. The famous event, I'm sure you all heard, a new Muslim, who was taken into the masjid by his neighbor, a Muslim neighbor, from Fajr till Maghrib and Isha. That neighbor kept him into the masjid. This person is a newcomer. Even for a person Like yourself, you should not be spending all of your day in the masjid. You should come, perform your salat, and then, obviously go back home, because masjid is here for you to spend as much time as you want to, but at the same time, you have other duties as well. You have work to do, you have your family, if you have time off, to take care of them and give time to them as well. These are all considered to be part of ibadat. If you spend the whole day in masjid, you're depriving others from the rights that they have. And this is something which is out of moderation. God does not want that. And so we know the incident where that person who was a new Muslim, let alone a new Muslim, bringing that person into the masjid and keeping him all day into the masjid. That person next morning when he knocked on the door to this new Muslim saying that, let's go, it's time for Fajr, we gotta go. He said, well, I don't want to have anything to do with this religion, which keeps me into masjid all day long, because I have family. I have to run my house. I have to put food onto my table. And this is not something which I can do or afford to do. So keep your religion to yourself, and I'm all right the way I've been living. God has given me enough. So, some people get turned off. And this is where we need to be moderate as far as ibadat is concerned. This is, inshallah, I'll try and conclude in the next couple of minutes in regards to this, quoting some of the ahadith from Masumeen alayhim salatu wasalam. One hadith which is quoted by our sixth Imam on the authority of, again, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Prophet said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, inna hadha ad-deen matinun. O Ali, this religion is strong. Therefore enter into it with gentleness. Do not make the worship of your Lord hateful for yourself. For the one who is fatigued his mount and is unable to continue his journey, that is the one who is excessive, has neither a riding animal nor can he travel. Just imagine yourself, you're traveling, you fatigue yourself out of it, you don't have anymore the animal that upon which back then Prophet is giving the example, you don't have the resource by which you were traveling. Just imagine, God forbid, you're taking a tour to countryside, or you're driving cross country in your own car. You took a risk to take your own car and it breaks down in the middle of the highway, and you're unable to find any place where you can get a ride or something. And at that point when you're tired and now you have to walk. So it says, don't be like that individual as far as performance of the ibadat is concerned, who doesn't have a riding animal, nor can this person travel. Therefore, act as one who hopes to die in old age, but be cautious with the caution of one who is afraid that he will die tomorrow. Another hadith talks about, in regards to our sixth Imam, that he says, once I was doing the tawaf of Kaaba. He said, marra bi abi wa ana bit tawaf. Once when I was very young, I was circumambulating around the holy house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And my father passed by and looked at me. When he saw me, I was making a hard effort and sweating. My father told me, O my son Ja'far, know that when God loves his servant, he will be pleased with even his small amount of worship and let him into the heavens. So you do not have to amass the ibadat as far as your account is concerned. If you do little bit of it, even with sincerity, with khuluz, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept that from you. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Wanted to go further, but I'm looking at the clock, time's running out. Inshallah, we'll continue one more session as far as the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned and the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned. Inshallah, we'll conclude that next week. Let us ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to be able to follow the commands that Quran has given to us, also follow the commands of prophets and Masumeen alayhim salatu wasalam. O Allah, hasten the zuhur of our awaited Imam and make us among the helpers and the soldiers of Imam. Wa akhir da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.